Okay, thanks TK for joining us today. Appreciate your time. How about just before we get into things, get into the meat of the conversation, you just give us a little bit of a background about yourself. I know we briefly met. I think it was over at one of the seminars in Twickenham, London, a few years ago now, and we haven't had a great opportunity. We've been on other sides of the world to catch up, so really looking forward to this conversation. So how about you just let everyone know who you are and what you've been doing recently?
So name's Terrence Kennell. Everyone calls me TK. Like no one calls me Terrence except like my mom, pretty much. Strength conditioning coach, strength conditioning rehab coordinator for Houston Astros now. In my second year at the Astros, like I said, we met, did my master's at St. Mary's University in London. So that's where we met then. And I think you went to Wake Forest like shortly after that, maybe like 6 or 7 months. You went back to America before I did. So. and so been over here now. Been back over here now 2 years, based in West Palm Beach. That's pretty much it. Used to play rugby, played basketball. Did my undergrad at Arkansas State University. I played rugby out there. Worked in a few different sports. This is the first time in baseball. First time I ever worked in baseball. Wasn't a baseball fan growing up. Like I think I played until I was like 12 or 13, and the rest I was pretty shit. And it's just other sports. It's just the sports I was a bit better at.
That's why we become strength coaches. So you've had a pretty interesting journey. Obviously, you were working over in London, and you're heavily involved in the rugby side, and now you've obviously moved into working in baseball. How have you found that transition to start with?
I think the biggest difference, from a transition point of view, is just understanding the different cultures of the sports. So rugby, the biggest thing you have to worry about usually is getting guys out of the gym and getting them more like who can run, do speed. Like that's the more important factors. Like you'd be like more like once you reach a professional level of rugby, like you probably are genetically gifted for the sport, so you probably already have the size. Gym is not as important, and really that's speed, change of direction, skills are way more valuable as opposed to in the baseball. It's tending to be more 50-50. So some guys who grow up heavily thinking that, if I lift weights, it'll make me tight, or if you move slow, maybe it'll mess up my swing, or I won't throw as hard. But you have the other side of it where you have guys who grew up the exact opposite, where they just want to get as big and as strong as possible. They hit the ball as far as they can, like they're Barry Bonds and Mark McGwire and stuff like that. And so I think in baseball, dealing with that, and then also dealing with in terms of the culture, you have guys who are signed at 17 years old out of Venezuela, Dominican Republic, Panama, Mexico, and at 17 years old they sign and give him $3 million. And so understanding that aspect, or having we had a high school kid we drafted who drafted at 18 years old out of high school, never been to college. And we gave him, I don't know how many millions of dollars we gave him. It was like a first round draft pick at 18. But dealing with those kinds of dealing with that kind of culture difference as well. And you have guys on the same team who one's getting paid $2,000 a month. The other one had a signing bonus of $4 million.
Wow!
And they're on the same team. It's still expected to both perform and care just as much as each other. But I think dealing with those kind of different aspects, it being such a large system, because professional baseball works similar to an academy style system you see in football, in soccer. And that you have the Houston Astros, which is our main major league team, and it goes down different levels. So there's AAA, AA, High A, Low A, short season, and then Gulf Coast League down West Palm. And so it's a huge system of development, and there's just lots of cooks in the kitchen essentially, because we have 150 players or so in the organization. I could be low ball, it might actually be a bit higher, and you have S&C coach at every level, an athletic trainer at every level. Your managers, your hitting coach, pitching coach, your first base coach at every level. So just lots of people involved in the machine. So lots of people to communicate with and things like that. So dealing with that kind of a large scale system where it's almost it literally is. It's an organization is a great term for it. That's really what it is. It's a giant $1 billion business.
And how are you managing that from a obviously communication standpoint? Like you've got maybe the head strength coach, and you've got like rehab coordinator, different coaches around different parts of the country as well. How often do you coordinate as a group? Are you kind of doing weekly meetings, like bi-weekly? Like kind of paint a picture. What does that look like?
So in season, we'd never obviously not ever all together at one time in season, and so just do like weekly like emails, like check up emails from like Dan House, who's like my supervisor, who's essentially our director of head of performance, our director of performance. He will send like emails out to all S&C staff. You have someone in his same position on the athletic training side who was there sending emails, and they have conference calls. On the S&C side, we don't really do conference calls just because we're all just in season. You're just so busy. Like this in season, it's 12, 13-hour days. You average one day off every 3 weeks or so in season. There's a game every day. Yeah, it's 142 game season in the minor leagues over a span of 5 months, and then the major leagues 162 games over a span of like six months or so. That's not including like playoffs.
All right, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah,
a lot of baseball.
Yeah. So like, luckily, like we understand, like everyone understands that on the S&C side. So we don't do conference calls in season just because it's just not realistic. And they're pulling somebody from something. Someone's gonna be on a bus going somewhere, or someone who just got into another city in the middle of the night, or someone was on their off day in like their league. So really, in spring training, which is our preseason, is the only time we're ever all together as a staff for those three and a half weeks.
And then are a lot more of the players together during that point as well, or like because I know nothing really about baseball.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So in preseason, just spring training, that's when everyone converges on to West Palm Beach into our like complex. So we'll have like 200 players probably total. Okay. At the complex, in the minor league side and then the major league side.
Nice. So you got a pretty almost that whole kind of organism, so to speak, is just kind of you've got to run your part and everyone else is running their parts, and it just comes together kind of once a year. And is that when do you put the plan together for the rest of the year as a team there, as part of that kind of interdisciplinary team? Is that when do you put like the kind of an annual plan out to a degree, or how does that kind of communication work when you're sitting like when you're down in West Palm Beach?
So we'll meet. We'll do like a big meetings as like entire staff like early January, and then we'll talk about like any updates you're doing like from our programming side, what are some of our thoughts, and people will share what they've learned in the off season. But from a program point of view, everyone programs like on their own for their team, for their players. We have set principles that we go off of. Like we use a vertical integration model. Everyone does speed. Everyone does like conditioning. But like how that kind of looks within your realm and your environment is up to you as a coach. So we allow for that autonomy, I've only found this working in baseball, which is apparently quite rare to allow coaches to program and coach. But we do that, and so everything's just like principle and like process based. It's never like a hard guideline like this is the program, you have to do this.
Yeah.
I don't care what the situation is. Which just realistically just can't be that way, because in AA you're dealing with bus rides that are 7 hours and longer. Like our longest one was 15 hours last year. Our shortest one 7. In AAA they're flying from like Austin, Texas, like Round Rock to Tacoma, Washington, over by Seattle to Vegas to Reno to like Oklahoma City, all over the country. You have other teams where they're playing like doing 2 games in a day, and like some of the other leagues. And so it's just everyone just has their own constraints you have to deal with. So because that you have to allow that flexibility to have like a good program and kind of be performance minded. So it's allowed that you're a coach, you're a coach for a reason, like because we all trust you as a staff to program like for the players' best in mind anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And so it's just getting done kind of what you can when you can at the end of the day. You can get a lift in, kind of, I don't know, you're going to use the steps at the stadium to do some jumps and whatever else, you know?
Yeah,
literally is.
Use steps at the stadium, use ISOs, throw med balls in the hallway. like
anything you can think of.
Yeah. I've done workouts with pitchers in a locker room using just like bands or TRX and like a med ball.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So no gym, and it's just essentially just a traveling gym, like whatever you can fit in your bag, and you're good to go. And that at the same time, like in itself, is obviously a new experience. Unless you can't even if you work in professional tennis, obviously you're on the road a lot of the year, but you generally have some sort of gym at the facility you'll go to or the hotel. But in your situation, obviously you're playing so much, you're almost sometimes not even in a hotel. It's just traveling straight to the next game. So as a coach, that makes you've got to be so much more on it and prepared in kind of the equipment you're taking with you, and use your imagination.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like you use your imagination a lot. You fully realize I'm fully about the idea of like it's adaptation over exercise. So like if we need to get a strength stimulus, they weren't able to go to the Gold's Gym in town. So I was like, so what can we do? That's like a maximum contraction. We can do ISO holds, ISO push at the bottom, ISO pulls at the top. Like there you go. It's maximum contraction in some regard. It's some bit of a strength stimulus. Is it ideal? Is it ideal? No. Does it get the job done for the time being? Yes.
Yeah, 100%. It's better that, and I like that as well. Adaptation over exercise. That's it. That's essentially the easiest and simplest way to look at it. And if it gets the job done, then it is what it is, Yeah. So moving on, like you're doing some pretty cool stuff down now. So correct me if I'm wrong, your current title is the Rehab Strength Conditioning Coordinator.
Yeah.
So do you want to just talk us through kind of what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, and then some of your like rehab protocols and the principles that you've been using and that you've developed?
Yeah. So day to day, usually like getting into more me and like the physical therapist, the PT, who's like on the AT side, the rehab coordinator. Like we'll have a meeting, just go through a list of guys pretty much every day. Got 17 guys in rehab currently. People don't know about baseball. Like the biggest injury you're gonna have is Tommy John surgery, which is a complete rupture of the UCL in the elbow. It's not like there's no way you can prevent it. Like it's just either happens. Like some guys get it early, some guys never get it, some guys get it late in their career. But it's pretty much essentially it's a minimum of a year. A year to 14 month like rehab process. So every baseball team will have anywhere from 15 to 20 or so guys in that they'll fall into that realm. So we have a couple of Tommy John surgeries, 2 ACLs, a lateral knee, lateral meniscus. What else? It seems pretty one shoulder that is a very rare shoulder injury. Like he like tore like part of his supraspinatus. Like it's just yeah. Never. I won't doubt I'd never seen it before. But
yeah. So dealing with quite a few. You're dealing with quite a few. Obviously, like the broadest of range of injuries there. And what are you doing to try and kind of get the guys back from that? Obviously, what principles have you put in place to be able to get everyone and run the simplest system? Because you've got guys with loads of different, maybe some quite acute injuries and then some chronic, like you say, the Tommy Johns is going to take a long time to get back from. How are you fitting all of those different injuries into a template almost that makes it kind of flow nice and easily for the rehab team?
Yeah. I think some what we're working on now is we split them into like levels. So like level 1 is like your restoration like process on our principles. That's purely just return to normal ranges of motion, passive ranges without pain, doing a bit of like isolated like loading of the tissue, like talking every day about the pain scale, and that's more like an AT like physical therapist led on that side because it's doing a lot of time in the training room doing things like doing all those kinds of things. And on the S&C side, it becomes more about like training all your healthy limbs because you want to decondition the tissues of the rest of the body. Otherwise, they're bound to get injured somewhere else. The ones that kind of moving past that, like always just like the quote I learned from Tom Farrell from my time in the UK was like focus on what we can do instead of what we can't do. So that's kind of the approach, especially in those early stages. If the player has like some baseline data with some of the metrics we use, like our force plates, our groin bar, Nord board, and stuff like that, they have some of that. Then we all review that as a staff and see like where they're at before they got injured. Part of their progressions needs to be like they need to be getting within 10% of like all these numbers. But that's like down the line. So before they're ever playing a baseball game again, they need to be within 10% of whether it be counter move and jump, single leg squat, single leg calf, shoulder IR, hip and abduction strength, Nord board score, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they progress through that, they go into like the preparation, like development side, and that's purely where we're just now building up tissue strength. Like that's when we're lifting, we're doing isos and eccentrics. We're trying to build up like some like functional capacity essentially. Working on any kind of like low level tissue stiffness, so like a little like calf Achilles stiffness if you can. Some like lower like hamstring like stiffness, there's some qualities if you're not sprinting just yet. But we're working on all those things. Maybe starting to do some extensive jumping a little bit, focus on like a really big absorption focus. All things that kind of
within that, are you using much kind of occlusion training and things? I know like Sam Portland especially tries to get some occlusion in there as well, especially early on. Like I've been experimenting with it myself, found it obviously very useful in kind of the situation we're currently in with having like no training equipment. Do you use that, and like how do you incorporate it?
Oh yeah, so we use blood flow restriction from essentially day one, if we can. It's like just from a muscle atrophy point of view and trying to alleviate as much as we can and keep as much muscle density as possible. So it'll be if they're non-move, if they can't load that tissue at all, and they can't move, really immobile, then we'll go like BFR and like EMS at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
Until once you get to a point where like they're able to move, then they'll either go a blood flow restriction as a means of like recovery post like a full like high day essentially, or they'll do a passive BFR like post. It'll be passive or active. Usually on the high days they'll do active BFR. Then just parts of like it's part of the training stimulus, and then on the low day they do a passive BFR where they're just laying there. Yeah. So we'll try.
Interesting, yeah. And is that typically led from an ATC standpoint, or are you getting involved with that more of an S&C standpoint?
On that BFR side, it's more of a sled through our ATCs, but a lot of the research I did while I was at St. Mary's was on BFR and EMS. I thought it was just pretty interesting. Yeah. And so I mean, so luckily, like I'm knowledgeable enough to be able to have those conversations with them.
Yeah.
About it.
Not
they did previously, really. And as an idea that I brought to them, showed them some of the research, something I published on it, and then they were okay. We're down to try it. So that's really nice having a staff that's like more that's open minded, but is really beneficial on my side because in like professional sports in the U.S., I'm sure it's probably similar even at college or at Wake Forest that like the medical side is kind of king. At the end of the day, like they don't like something that you're doing, like you probably end up having to stop it.
yeah, it's definitely all about having those open lines of communication. I think, and that's obviously a thing with staffs across the country. Like the more we can communicate, luckily the trainer I work with, we communicate daily, and we try to have as best communication as possible. Obviously, it kind of has peaks and troughs throughout the season, depending on like how busy they are. Because unfortunately, like in the situation I've got, like the trainer that works with my tennis team he works with football as well. So that's kind of the situation. And if I've got my women's tennis team, so she's got another 2 teams. So there's obviously like different issues in there, but if we can, I think the communication obviously is the biggest thing. And with back to the BFR stuff, just briefly, what I found quite interesting coming to the US is typically the BFR in the UK would be it would definitely be coordinated with like the physio, but then almost led through or from my experience, it's almost led through the S&C. Whereas when you come to the US, it's led through the kind of the physio/trainer. And then once you've kind of hit those markers or whatever your markers may be, then it's kind of passed on to the strength and conditioning coach. And a big thing that I think gets lost sometimes within this kind of return to play protocol is how do we actually pass the athlete from the trainer to the strength coach? Now I know you were kind of talking through the levels there. Maybe we can get back into that and say, but how do you find that obviously that pathway going from trainer to strength coach and that kind of bit in the middle where a lot of S&C programs, a lot of rehab programs kind of go to die if you don't get that little bit in the middle just right.
I think some of us that helps like progressing stage is on the AT side, athletic trainer, PT side, they have like their own assessments they do, like functional assessments essentially, and that's kind of like some that their marketers will then pass on. Like, okay, they're full grow in like the weight room, or they're full grow on the field. The big ones like we can get guys full grow in the weight room first by then passing some of the closed chain work, stuff like that, the basic functional assessments. Then we're good on that end, so then we can get full grow in the weight room, and then if it's going in terms of being on field, that's where it's more my realm. That's when I look at more like the force plate jumps, the single leg squat, single leg calf, things like that, looking for any asymmetries or like places where they're weak at, and comparing that to their baseline data. So I think having on that trainer side, them having that kind of set of like, even it had to be extensive by any means. If it's just like 2 or 3 kind of like functional assessments, if you will, like that, I think that kind of help and not make objectifying that process.
Yep. And do you find, I know you use the word like full go, and then my experiences sometimes with some physios have been, oh yeah, they're full go, they can go back to rugby, and I just like said, whoa,
yeah,
like, your full go, like you finished your kind of, or you've passed your maybe KPIs or whatever it's going to be, or your indicators within the physio kind of treatment realm. Now you've got to pass your KPIs within kind of the sports performance, strength conditioning kind of weight room realm. And maybe you've got to hit some like high speed numbers or whatever it's going to be, if it's a hamstring injury or whatever, before you're actually properly full go. If that makes sense. And I think sometimes that can be lost as well. And like I've had that issue before where it's been told, oh, okay, yeah, you're full go, and then you're full go kind of out of that area, going into the strength and conditioning realm. And I think that understanding of the language between those almost 2 departments, I don't think they should necessarily be seen as 2 departments, because it should be kind of merged as one to a degree if the communication is good enough. But do you have like a similar language or anything that you use with kind of the trainers yourselves, and maybe even like the sports coaches, to help blend everything together?
Yeah, I would say usually like we're pretty good because like our offices are all like next to each other, and everything all see into the gym. That we necessarily have to change the language between the ATs and the S&C coaches. So when we say like, we'll say like a full go in the gym, like because we define things by stages. I think that helps as well. So we'll go like, oh, they're stage 1 running, or they're stage 2 running, they're stage 3. They're not 100% yet. And then when it comes to speaking to the sport coaches, it's like somewhat similar. We'll say things like in the weight room, they're fine, but they're still not baseball ready yet. But they can be out there. They can do some really low level skills, or they can play catch, or they can hit off a tee and things like that. And so I think explaining to some of the baseball coaches what the player can do just from the get go makes them a bit more positive at where that player's at in that stage, instead of being like, oh, well, they can't do this, they can't do that, they can't do this, can't do that, can't do that. All they can do is one thing now. Instead of just being like, oh, they can play catch today. Most of the time, coaches are like, "Oh, okay, great. Can he do anything else? Oh, he can hit off a tee, or like he can hit in the cage. He just can't run side to side and do like the field and stuff." Oh, they're great. And they see it as like, they see it as like they're progressing, even if it's the same thing every day for the next 4 weeks. The fact that they're out there doing something, like, helps a lot.
I think that's a big thing as well. Just like you said, just getting them outside, being able to do something, and then. Because it is a big psychological element, obviously, being injured, coming through that return to play protocol. A lot of the time, the athlete themselves wants to feel like they're getting closer to being back on the court or the field or whatever it is. So if we can even this is what I did with some of my guys. We just took the bikes outside. We took some of the equipment outside, like onto the court or onto the court next to where the guys were playing, just to make them feel involved with the team again. Almost, you don't want to segregate them, just say no, you're injured, you've got to stay in that corner over there, and you can't do anything. And I think it's good for them to see that, and it's good for the coach to see that as well. And like you say, the coach actually starts to think, okay, maybe this guy's a little bit closer to coming back than we think, just because he's out on the court now. Like last month he wasn't even out on the court, or whatever it is, and it's trying to make and have those conversations to make the athlete feel like they're actually going in the right direction, especially if you've got someone like the Tommy John injury, quite a chronic injury, obviously, that's taken a long time to get better, going through your operations and things like that as well. Do you just want to, I know we kind of touched on your levels and your stages there. Do you mind going into a little bit of detail just about what those kind of different stages entail on that return to play protocol?
Yeah. So a big one on like our mean, essentially our like preparation stage 2, stage 3 is just training. So like it's just your general like we're lifting, we're getting closer to running potentially if it's not a lower limb injury. We follow like a high-low model of loading through the week. We get into that like we call it realization or like actualization phase, and that's where we're almost 100%. Like we're doing change direction work, we're sprinting, we're jumping. If they're like pitcher, they're probably throwing more, getting a greater density of throws, more intensity as well. So to build up to throw like a bullpens. That's kind of like the basic principles of it. But if we're going off of like a true like lower limb injury return to running, so we go like stage 1 is like our skills and drills process. That's your pogos, your ankling, your rhythm A skips. If they're progressing up, they do A switches, so a bit faster switch in the air, striking the ground harder, so a bit more force. Scissor runs as well. So another thing, it's like high frequency, fast switching, more force into the ground. And then that session will end with like a set of tempos. So like 60, 70 yards, 1 rep every minute, like 1 set of like 6. It's like usually the first session. Then the exit stage from that stage 1 is 2 sets of 6 on a rolling 60-second clock. And that's the stage 1. But before every on-field session, they'll always do those skills and drill stuff. That's a basic like loading, tendon stiffness, like for on-feet work. And so hamstring guys do that. ACL guys, anybody with a lower limb injury, that's their stage 1. Then stage 2 is to introduce some more XL decel like components. So we work on putting the brakes on, work on putting the brakes off like suddenly. Nothing's reactive just yet. It's all just basic. Like everything's predicted. You know exactly where you're going. You're running 15 yards and you're slowing down for 5 yards and coming to a complete stop, stuff like that. We do a bit of shuffles. Everything's still nothing's reactive still yet. We do a bit of shuffles, some weaves, a bit like botch drill. People like run forward, like shuffle lateral, back pedal, things like that. Run 10 yards, back pedal 10 yards. That's just building that capacity of like change direction. And the exit stage for that is weaves. We still will a session, like 1 set of 5, 1 set of 6, just like that volume. Because a sport like baseball, like your fitness doesn't have to be as much as a sport like in rugby or in tennis. So you don't need as much fitness. So 1 set of 6 is enough to maintain fitness qualities for them. So your exit stage criteria would be like some more XL work. You're getting that 80% range of like speed and accelerations, and you ever do all change direction drills with no acute pain afterwards and no acute swelling or anything like that or bruising. And then move on to that stage 3. That stage 3 is true speed work, true at high intensity acceleration work. We're trying to get you to that 90% plus over 15 yards. We're always doing skills and drills every time. But for every on-feet session, it was just always building up those qualities. I would try to get you within 10% of your max acceleration in 15 yards. And we're getting I want to say it's 4 reps at that speed.
Okay.
Yeah, four reps at that speed, 4 reps between, obviously, because we're trying to get max intensity. We may even bring out the speed gates at that point, just to give that almost like stress inoculation side of it. Once they pass that stage 3, then they go to stage 4, which we don't do stage 4 for pitchers because the pitchers will never have to run that, never have to sprint that long. Like the most they're going to sprint is really 10 to 15 yards to field a bunt and then they're throwing it, and that's it. But for position players, especially outfielders, who have to cover massive space out there, there's only 3 of them. Yeah. Then at stage 4 is at max velocity. That's where we're probably using speed gates at just about every session, every speed session, because we want them to get like that 95%, 100% of match speed, and we want them ideally within 10%, really closer than 10% of what the previous match speed was. And that's where we're working on gears, sprint, float, sprint, hollow runs, flying 10s, flying 20s. And that session looks like they get three reps at max speed over 40 yards, and like 4 reps between. And once we look at the GPS, like we have GPS like catapult, look at they're within less than 10% of their max speed. Or we use speed gates. We got real time to show exactly what the time was, and then after that, they are gone. They're gone. They're full on to full sport. At that point, usually that they're already involved in their sport as well, doing some practice, a lot of low level practice and stuff like that. So they're just not playing games yet.
Yeah. So as soon as they've hit those three sprints within 10%, and then they're good to go back in the game.
Yeah.
Nice. I like that. And then, are you using any? I know you talked about those stages and jumping from stage to stage. Is there any like quantitative kind of feedback? I know you obviously had your numbers with the like the speed, the flying tens or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
Is a lot of that just based off kind of qualitative feedback? So just speaking with the athlete themselves, how you feel? And you mentioned looking at like, is there any kind of swelling and stuff like that, any bruising, dependent. How are you kind of deciding on them jumping from stage to stage? And are you trying to rush them, not necessarily rush them, but push them through the stages as quick as possible?
Depending on how we kind of decide if they're ready, if they're ready for the next stage, is if they pass that exit criteria. First, like stage 1, they pass it. And once they pass that, then it's okay. And we tell them, and we also build them up to it. Like the entire process early on, like we're talking about, like, your stage 1 session is this. Like we almost make it like a big deal. It's like in a way, like high five, and we're all like really pumped up afterwards. We'll play music like while they're doing it as well. And then stage 2 would be similar thing. Like our end goal for this stage is to be able to do these drills, like a box run, shuffle, a weave, and I said tempos after, and then have no pain the next day. The day of, be pain free through all of it. And still, we're always tracking like the FCL decel amount, always tracking their speed, using catapult and stuff like that. So that's always really helpful. And so I think that's like the way we really kind of progress it.
Yep.
On that side of it is having those set exit criteria. So you can't go to stage 2 until you pass stage 1. But I don't care. It doesn't matter how good you feel, but if you can't do 2 sets of 6 tempos at a rolling 60-second clock with 2 minutes rest between the sets at 70% speed, you can't do change direction work.
Yep.
so it's playing that to them. I think Prince's idea is, okay, I need to be like focused and be attentive to this session and like make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I want the PT side, PT-AT side, but also from the training side. I can't remember the other question.
So yeah, just kind of the exit criteria, and then how you're kind of obviously, linking those. And I can't remember what the other one was myself, actually. But it's all right. We can move on. So I know you mentioned there actually some tempos, and if I'm guilty, I know we've kind of went back and forward over Instagram messaging a few times about the just the tempos and some of the running that you're doing yourself. How does that kind of? Are you just doing like solely some tempo stuff as part of their aerobic development down there, or how does their conditioning program typically look, and what's some of the stuff that you've maybe been playing around with, not necessarily only within your work environment, just personally as well?
So for us, from a conditioning point of view, not just like a rehab. So we have walk bikes at every affiliate. So we do like a lot of off-feet stuff, especially for the pitchers, because pitchers just go through so much load off their front leg, like decelerating and getting that big lead leg extension, similar forces you see like a triple jumper or a long jumper. And so we'll put them off feet a good bit. We just do a lot of low level aerobic based stuff first, especially the first like 4 weeks. And like that's the stuff that everyone hates. It's not sexy, but and like we'll do some like aerobic power intervals, or guys are doing maybe 2-3 minute runs, or like 1 minute, like, and resting like 2 to 1. And you work to rest, but it's all at a very low intensity. They're running at a 50% speed, because they're just a slow plod, really. Like, then we'll progress to something like more intense. We'll sprinkle in a bit of some tempos, try to get a bit more elastic stuff in there. For the sake of like times, we'll do what you do for the tempos. We'll do like time. We'll do like 15 on 30 off, or 15 on 45 off. 20 on 40 off, things like that. Just for the sake of like constraints of like the environment, the times you have, and like just setup. It's like we want you to like having to go on a baseball field in the middle of the outfield. Like walking 80 yards.
Yeah.
So it just comes a bit of a hassle on that end because there's some other things you have to do. And so that's kind of usually how conditioning kind of sprinkles out. We do a lot of aerobic work, a bit of mass stuff for position players. Position players, they play every day.
Yep.
They usually get 1 day off every 13 games, 12, 13 games usually. And so the on-field conditioning will be like much shorter. So maybe do like a mass kind of interval, or maybe they're 20 on, 20 off, or 30 on, 30 off, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just to get some kind of like conditioning hit.
Yeah.
Sprinkling some a bit more repeat speed stuff, especially for like relievers. So the pitchers who come in the middle of the game and they're doing pitching 2 innings max usually, 3 at the absolute most. Really 1.5 to 2 innings they're pitching. So some of those guys will do some more like repeat speed stuff because it's more similar to what they have to do in a game. The A-lactic stuff is more valuable. We do that more with the position players. It's more relative to them. Some of the pitchers, after they get past that aerobic stage, like we'll do some of that because there's a pitch that is it's like a pitch every 32 seconds, I want to say.
Right. Okay.
So it's like, so really A-lactic. And obviously a pitch lasts like that. Like it's just So that's kind of how we like our conditioning kind of model works, and then we just adjust guys off feet like as needed. Because there are some pitchers who just like they just prefer running. Like the bike's just too miserable for them, and you get less out of the bike because they don't want to do it and they hate it.
Yeah.
So it's like those guys like and they feel healthy running. It's like we can just run.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing that I've definitely learned over the last few years. It doesn't matter what you think may be the best option. If they don't want to do it, then it's not going to be worthwhile doing it at the end of the day. So you've just got to be able to be so adaptable, and almost like at the end of the day, the athlete knows their body best. So if I'm talking to maybe a 5th-year guy or something like that, and he's like, oh, maybe I feel like I actually, and then this has happened, I feel like I actually play better tennis when I play less tennis and I do more kind of weight room conditioning, mobility, whatever it is. He's like, I want to come in and see you more in the weight room than I do kind of spend not necessarily total time on the court, but I want to drop 1 or 2 tennis sessions per week and actually come into the weight room to make sure my body feels good.
Yeah.
And that's actually quite refreshing. I think obviously that's something that you don't know on day one as a freshman.
Yeah.
That's something you learn when you're a good few years down the line, and even probably when you finish college if you want to play pro tennis. That's the type of stuff that you learn, and it's one of those things where you still like it takes some balls to do, because you've got to be able to say to the head coach, look, I don't think I need to be doing this team practice today, or I don't need to do my individual session today. I need to go and spend some time looking after my body. And that definitely takes some balls to do, because a lot of obviously students or student athletes, they're wanting to please the coach all the time. But to get the best out of your performance, at the end of the day, you've got to know what is best for you.
100%.
So just moving on from that, we'll kind of close it up. I don't want to take too much of your time here, but you've had a pretty like unique journey, a pretty cool journey. Kind of obviously I think you went out to Japan for a little bit as well. There's a pretty cool story behind that I've heard. I haven't heard it firsthand, so if you want to share that, you feel free. But my question to you would be like, what advice would you give to a young coach wanting to get into the system, or not necessarily make it big time or anything like that, but just want to kind of better themselves and become a better coach?
I guess I'll tell the. I feel like it's become a bit infamous. The story's become a bit infamous now. Like I get asked it all the time.
I love it, man.
So how I ended up in Japan was I got an internship at North Dakota State under Jason Miller. I can't forget his name all the time, so I always now say it. Jason Miller, who was director of Olympic sport at North Dakota State. About a week before, I saw Kier running flat, like rugby strength coach on like social media, post about internship in Japan with Toshiba Brave Lupus. Saw it. I remember talking to my teammates about it. He's like, dude, like you should 100% apply for it. I was like, I'm not getting it. Like, I'm not gonna get it. There's gonna be like 200 people apply for this thing. There's gonna be people who actually have like the degree, who have more experience than me, stuff like that. And I was like, sure. I was like, I'll apply, whatever. Get in my truck a couple days later, drive to North Dakota State in Fargo, North Dakota, from Jonesboro, Arkansas, where I was doing my undergrad and playing rugby at. like a 15, 16-hour drive to get there. I'm like 3 days in. I get there, my second day there, I get an email saying, like, oh, here's the second part of like the interview process for the internship in Japan. I'm like this. I'm like, okay, all right, sure. I do it. I'm like really thorough and I take my time and do it. I was like, I made it this far apparently, so might as well go ahead and do my best at this. So sent it in. Next, like a day later, if that, I get a Skype interview with Kier, and I'm like, there's no way this is actually happening. There's no way I even have a shot. Yeah, get a Skype interview. Day later, at this point, I'm 3 or 4 days into being in Fargo. My first official day was the day I left. It was supposed to be my first official day of the internship.
Wow.
But so yeah, then Kier contacts me an email, says like, offer me the position. If I accept, I need to be in Japan as soon as possible. Fly into Haneda Airport in Tokyo. And so literally like booked the flight, drove. I've been in Fargo, North Dakota all 4 days. Left my rent for that, but I put that somewhere on the counter. Sent an email to Jason Miller at 4:00 in the morning and saying like, basically explaining the whole thing to him, saying like, I'm really sorry. Like, I understand I've only been here 3 days, but I'm driving back to Arkansas to get my passport and get on a plane to Japan. And then, yeah, so I drove 15 hours straight. When I drove up there, I like stopped in the middle and like Nebraska, but I drove for 15, 16 hours straight.
Wow.
I just redlining it to get back. So literally, I booked my flight for 2 days later. I sat laid in my apartment for a day and a half. Like repacked, packed like one bag, like my rucksack. And I was like, I'm on a plane tomorrow to Tokyo.
What did the director say at North Dakota State?
He's actually super, super understanding. So I'm really thankful that. I mean, I'm sure no matter what, I probably still came off like kind of a dickhead. But he was like, yeah, I fully understand. Like, it sounds like an amazing opportunity. I'd already said before I wanted to like work in rugby, so be really interested. He knew like Kier was someone I put as like, when you apply for internship, and it's just like who you like follow, like trying to learn from, like influences. Like Kier was like on that list anyway, so he knew who he was.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was super understanding. Like said like, oh, best of luck to you. Like stay in touch and everything. Let me know how it goes. And, I was in Japan for 3 and a bit months.
Wow. And how was your time in Japan? What did you learn? What were the key takeaways? And what was in fact, we'll start with that one. Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah. I loved it. I loved being in Tokyo. I lived in Korea and China before as a kid, and so like so being like in East Asia, I'm like very, very comfortable being the clear outsider. But yeah, so I love Tokyo. I love like the culture. It's like a fun city. The boys are really good. I remember one funniest story that happens that when they went away for a preseason game, and so obviously there were guys that was left behind. It was me and then that Chris McCann, who's and last I saw he was at King's College, one of the S&C coach there. But so it's me. I'm left to do a speed session with 8 Japanese players, no translator because the translator's gone with like Kira and the other foreign coach and a couple foreign players to the preseason game. I'm like, all right, my demonstrations need to be really on point here because no one knows what the hell I'm saying.
That's good.
yeah. And then I think one of my biggest takeaways from my time in Japan, other than like the pure like S&C side, but like aside from like just what you learn in S&C and like from the sports science and like transition point of view, and, like a programming side is like word economics. And Kier told me this is like you only say what needs to be said and all you can say.
Yeah.
And so I've taken that as an approach to like do it just in life in general, really, but in coaching it's helped a lot. Especially even now working in baseball, I deal with a lot of guys who don't speak English as a second language. A lot of guys from Venezuela, Dominican Republic, Cuba, and you literally, if you throw every cue in the book at them, they just stop and look at you like, I'm now frozen with thought. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Almost like a minimal effective dose, you know?
Yeah, literally.
That's interesting. That's such a good story. I love that story. And then what was like, what you've learned from those experiences, which is obviously pretty cool. Essentially at the flip of a flip of a coin, just jumping on a plane and going halfway around the world. What have you learned from those experiences that you would pass on to a younger coach, like asking for advice?
I say always be open-minded and adaptable, because you just never know what things, especially in S&C, like things can change the day of. Like you never know when, never know when you never know when you're not gonna have a job anymore. Like and so always be ready and prepared to like try something different, be open to a new sport, new environment, new country. There's sports played all around the world, so like there's no reason just to do S&C in one country if you don't have to.
For sure, love it. And then just finally, is there any books or like resources that you'd suggest that's helped you?
S&C point of view, I go Ultimate MMA Conditioning. I'm kind of like conditioning like nerd. I like read about energy system development and stuff. So that's a big one for me. Actually on my home, the Special Strength Training Manual for Coaches.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult read, and it's probably like my third time trying to go through it. But it's really good as a resource. Applied Sprint Training, James Smith. What We Need is Speed by Hank Kreinhoff. I really like that book. Digging into Fergus Conley's first book, Game Changers.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start that and read into that. Those are probably some of my big ones. Super Train's always a good reference book, but man, it's just so hard.
It's dense, man.
Yeah. Transfer Training is another one. Always go back to.
Yep.
And then from like a general book perspective, Economy of Truth. I really like that book. I've read that book in probably like 10 days. Like I just sucked that book. It's really like more philosophy, like stoicism kind of book. Principles by Ray Dalio. Yeah. Trying to think of another book.
You got
I just
got some good
reading,
ones there.
Yeah, I just started reading his book, The Last Lecture, which is like literally, in hindsight, it's a bit of a morbid book to start reading in the middle of like this whole pandemic. It's about this lecturer who's giving his last lecture. Like he's like terminal like cancer, and he was giving his last lecture to his students, and they turned it into a book and like recorded. It's like on YouTube as well.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's weird. We're just kind of like, it's about almost just like being adaptable and just going for it. Really, it's what it seems to be about. Like I haven't put it down since I started it yesterday.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I made a note of that and the other one you mentioned there as well. But definitely some good reading materials and advice. Just finally, where can people find you if they want to drop you a line?
Yeah. My Instagram is @TKennell like phys prep. So it's Kennell with 2 N's, 2 L's, and then phys prep like physical preparation. And then my Twitter, where's my Twitter? My Twitter is TK phys prep. Yeah, TK phys prep. So it's pretty much the same thing. And email tkennell@astros.com. Anyone shoot me email, a DM on Twitter, Instagram. Like I'm open to chatting to anybody all the time, pretty much. Like I have to give it back because I've done that to a bunch of coaches, including you. Like I have no qualms about like messaging. If there's someone like who's doing something I'm like into or like that is someone I want to learn from or talk to, like I'll just shoot a message on Instagram, like or Twitter. Like the worst they can say is no, and most people don't say no, so just fine.
So easy in this day and age as well, just to shoot it over Instagram. You can see exactly what maybe the video is that's perked your interest or whatever it is. So
yeah, that's great. 100%.
That's great. All right, well we'll close it out there, but I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, and thanks a lot.
Oh, no worries at all, man. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you.